Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the hybrid virtual and in-person meeting of the Policy Committee of the MPO. And we will call the meeting to order and start with a pledge allegiance. If you could just put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And we will then, I just want to do a moment of silence. We have our flag at half-mast in front of County Center for the death of Sheriff Brian Levine of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office on the call of duty on Monday night, I believe. He was killed by someone he was trying to arrest. So anyway, if we could take a moment of silence for him. Thank you. And we won't do any votes because we don't have our in-person quorum, so we wouldn't be doing approval of the minutes, correct? And maybe we can do, well, I don't think we even need a quorum call at this meeting, actually, because we don't have the in-person quorum here. But at this time, I'll call for public comments, if we have any public comments. And doesn't appear that we do. So we can move to, we're not going to be doing election of the officers as well. So we can move, maybe we'll have a fast meeting. And I want to thank Commissioner Cohen for coming in, for trying to get us for our quorum this morning. At any rate, let's go to the discussion items on the MPO organizational documents and board requests that have been made about this. And we'll have Beth Alden present that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I apologize about the last minute change in plans with the action items. We did have one of our board members had an emergency on Monday, sought out his alternate, and then his alternate just let us know this morning that he needs to go for a COVID test. Goodness. So we'll postpone our election of officers to our next meeting. I wanted to take some time this morning to dig a little bit more into the topics that you brought up at our December board meeting. A couple of organizational issues. And so two of them are fairly straightforward to handle. Those are considering term limits for our board officers. So that would be a simple bylaws change. And there is a copy in your agenda packet of the bylaws with some proposed language that we've added, and it is highlighted, and I'm happy to share that on screen if you like.
Ms. Alden, because I think this could be a rather long discussion, actually, and I was just told that we do have some public comment on WebEx. We won't see them, but if we could, I'm not sure what it is, but I will recognize who's ever out there, the first person we have for public comment, and if you could just identify yourself.
Yes, I believe we have Chris Vila on the call. Chris, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Go ahead with your comments, sir.
May I begin? Absolutely. So I wanted to wish everybody a happy new year, and hopefully things will get better as we progress on this year. I know we've had a very, very dark page turn. So my appreciation goes to the chair to recognize that. So my comments are really quick, where Beth was about to talk about the organization documents. I think fundamentally, like, the most important thing is we like to have an extension of public comment. Transportation is a very, very complex issue to talk about. Sometimes I'll have to just talk over it myself 4 or 5 times to understand how these plans work. And it's not easy. We're not all engineers. We're not all experts. And we are the public trying to take this really complex information and just prove our points with it. So with that said, I'm hoping that you all will have discussion to extend public comment. I think 4 minutes is pretty good. More would even be better, but I think 4 wouldn't really hurt that much at all. Especially if you guys know that there's going to be a big tip hearing, you can plan for that in advance and know how much time it's going to take and so on. And one other thought is that I just want to leave this to you guys. Since 1995, we made some really bad decisions. We approved the Tampa Interstate Study, and we approved it with a board set up similar to the one we have today. We made some really bad decisions where over 300 people were displaced, and we're continuing to pollute our airs with large highways. And we've seen a lot of pedestrian deaths. So I would strongly consider, as you are reviewing who's on this organization, maybe reconsider the people who actually profit more from this. And that would be the tolling agency. They need roads to connect to their system so they can generate revenue so they can pay off their debt. So they have a special interest. And then also, you know, I love for the airport to be there, but we've known for a very long time that they side with large highways, and they just built over $3 billion worth of parking garages in their facility. So they need that revenue. Now, I'm not saying like we should cut them off from the revenue, but I think what I'm trying to say is that we need to have a very clear, conscious decision that because roads do impact all, especially when they're placed within communities. So please reconsider that, you know, and I would urge that you guys consider putting a citizen appointee on the board. It's been done before. There's other MPOs out there that have had that in our nation. I don't see why we couldn't do it. Anyways, those are my comments, and I appreciate you listening to me. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. So we will move back to, we don't have any other commenters, I'm assuming.
That is correct.
Thank you. And so we will move back. I wanted to get that before we started the presentation to Ms. Alden, and we'll have our discussion about the MPO organization.
Great, thank you. Okay, so just coming back to this, there were 3 things that came up at our last board meeting in terms of our organization. So should we provide term limits for our officers? Should we consider changing the name of the organization to something that has transportation in the title? And can we set our quorum lower? Is it possible to change our voting membership? We have a fairly large board, and our quorum at this point is 9, so that's a fairly large group. So going through those things one at a time. The term limits, if you would like to establish term limits for your officers, that can be easily done by adding some language to your bylaws. And so there is a copy of your bylaws in your agenda packet. And we are proposing to add just a couple of one sentence to that. Under Section 3, MPO officers, no officer may serve for more than 2 years consecutively. So I think that was the suggestion that came up at the last meeting. If you would like us to move forward with that change, that could be done by bringing this bylaws change to the board twice, once just as a status report, and then at a second meeting for a vote. The question of changing the name of the organization. So the name of the organization is established in the interlocal agreement that creates the MPO. And so I've provided a copy of the interlocal agreement in your packet as well. The interlocal agreement is signed by all of the member organizations of the MPO, including the Department of Transportation, which serves as a non-voting advisor. So it is a fairly extensive process to update the interlocal agreement. We will need to review it here at our board, propose some changes, then bring all of those changes to all of the different agencies, have their council review it, have it approved by their governing boards. And so that's FDOT, the county, the 3 cities, HART, the Aviation Authority, the Expressway Authority, the Port Authority, the Planning Commission, and the school district are all signatories to the interlocal agreement at this point. So, as I said, that's a fairly extensive process. If you would like to move forward with a name change sooner, Another option would be to use the statute that allows for fictitious names for organizations, whereby we would file a name change. I think we have to announce it and provide something like 2 weeks worth of public notice of that name change. And so that's another approach we could take. If we want to do that, we might want to go ahead and add that into our bylaws as well. And so there's some proposed language in the bylaws that's highlighted near the top that says doing business as, and I think it was Hillsborough Transportation Planning Organization was the suggestion for the name. Yeah, Hillsborough Transportation Planning Organization. So, so those are the two relatively easy changes. If you would like to move forward with those, we'd want to bring them to the full board to discuss. The question of changing our voting membership is a more extensive process. The voting membership is established in the MPO apportionment plan. The apportionment plan is reviewed after every census to make sure that our voting representation reflects the population as it grows and changes. And so we are on tap to do a regular review of our apportionment plan within the next year to 2 years. And I've asked Sarah McKinley, one of our principal planners, to give you an overview presentation of what that process looks like. The bottom line is a change to our voting membership will need to be approved by, at a minimum, the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and the governor. And then we would update the interlocal agreement to reflect the new apportionment plan. And so this would be a fairly time-consuming process. But it is something that we will need to undertake within the next couple of years in any case. So Sarah is on tap to give you an overview of the reapportionment process that we'll be getting started on in the next year to 2 years. But before we go there, do you have any questions about what I've gone over so far? And would you like us to move forward with the bylaws changes that we've brought forward?
So, and the bylaws changes you're talking about are the first two, the renaming and the 2-year term limit for officers. I raised both of those, and I would like to move forward on both. I just think it's wise for organizations to have some kind of term limits for officers. And, you know, we recently had, you know, one person who remained chair for 6 years. I don't think that's particularly healthy. And so I would, you know, support 2-year term limits. I just think it really gets some better representation. And I guess I could just throw that out there first and maybe talk about the transportation, the name, second.
Okay, so I agree with you. I think it's fine. I think we ought to take it to the board, and I do think we should have a rotation of officers on a fairly routine basis. I think 2 years is plenty for anybody to serve as chair. So I would agree with that.
And I don't know if we have, I understand, is Commissioner Smith on?
Yes, thanks. You know, I could kind of quickly go through about 3 things. I totally agree with term limits for the same reasons y'all just said. I like the name change as well to make it more obvious when we're talking to people. I've been talking to people for many years about planning issues, and when I talk about the MPO, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Even if I say Metropolitan Planning Organization, they don't know that's our transportation planning organization. So I like that. I really I think it's worth considering this path of fictitious name because that leaves it MPO there in case we need it to be with all the other MPOs that are around, but it lets us constantly refer to it. I don't know. This is the first time I'm thinking about that, so maybe there's some issues with that I haven't thought of, but on the face of it, I do like that path, the easy, simple path of the fictitious name on top of MPO. Maybe there's some confusion that could engender that I haven't thought about. And one last question I have is on the membership, the voting membership. I am very interested in taking a hard look at that, and as difficult as that process may be, since we have to do it anyway, looking at who's a voting member and who's not and why. But one question, which of our members currently get an alternate, are allowed to have an alternate sit in? I think that there are problems with a member and an alternate beyond some of the problems with membership. So I just was curious, who gets an alternate on our board as is?
All of the board members.
Did you say we were going to have a presentation on that part of it coming up this morning?
I did. We don't have that particularly in the presentation, but.
Okay. I'm sorry. So I think I covered up the answer that you gave there. Sorry.
So all of the board members are able to have an alternate. That was actually something, a provision that was added the last time we went through the apportionment process.
I'm sorry, this is Cameron Clark. I can just to clarify that just a little bit. Each entity or organization that has a seat on the board has an alternate. So the difference would be, for instance, the mayor of Temple Terrace has a voting alternate, but Temple Terrace only has one board seat. So the Board of County Commissioners also has one alternate, which is to say there are obviously 5 county commissioners, but there's only one voting alternate. And of course, 5 out of 7 commissioners are already on the board, so you couldn't have an alternate for each member. It's essentially the way it works is there's an alternate for each appointed body, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I just want to get all my comments up in one go.
And I'm just wondering too, I see Councilman Maniscalco's on there. Did you have anything? Commissioner Cohen.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if, there we go. So I agree with Commissioner Smith about the idea that I think it would be much cleaner if we want to do a name, to do a fictitious name rather than go through a change in the interlocal agreement. I had a question for Ms. Alden on that, though. Why is the word organization in there? I feel like the word organization actually weakens the title of the organization. I think that if it were the Tampa Bay Port Organization or the Aviation Organization, it has a lot less meaning than authority, which I know is a term of art. But are there other words besides organization that might better describe the real mission of what this organization does?
Sure. The word organization.
I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. So the word organization comes from the federal law, which is intended to be generic. The federal law is just seeking to have some generic organization in each metropolitan area that is coming together to agree on transportation plans and priorities, so that the federal government has the assurance that when federal funds are spent, they're consistent with local wishes. So a number of other MPOs are actually regional planning councils.
So the word council could be used.
Could be used.
I mean, I think these are worth considering because to Commissioner Smith's earlier point, no one understands what the MPO is, and the word organization is, I just think it's weak. It implies a lack of authority over the subject matter. And I will tell you, for all the years I was on the MPO, it frustrated me. I felt like the title of the organization didn't really match what its mission was. I do think, though, trying to change it in the interlocal agreement is probably a very time-consuming and fraught with all sorts of unforeseen problems. But it's just my 2 cents on that. And then when we talk about the possibility of changing the quorum and voting members, I'll have some further comments on that.
Thank you. I have a lot to say about that, also the officers, but in terms of the name, I had suggested this, and one of the things is that a lot of MPOs have at least changed their names to TPOs, and I knew it came from the federal law, the MPO moniker or whatever. And so across the state of Florida, there's a lot of TPOs, and then there's ones that do like totally obscure names. As far as I'm concerned, it makes it even more incomprehensible, whatever that it is that they are. You know, and so the one thing about a TPO is people are around would understand, like in other jurisdictions and stuff, kind of what that is. But I don't know that that's of so much value as a local understanding. And, you know, I said too, I'm just tired of, actually, for all these years, kind of, the MPO is the transportation plan, you know, to have to say that when you say the name of it, because it's just totally obscures its mission. But I really do like the name of changing transportation planning, to me, rather than authority, a commission, I think would be a good, I like commission better than
Council.
yeah, or better than organization. I think that's good. I just didn't think outside of what the other ones. I was trying to get rid of that word metropolitan. So somebody might understand what it is, but I like Transportation Planning Commission. I think you're right, that reflects somewhat some authority of some sort. And authorities I usually think of as operating a thing, like
Right.
airport or the port or something, rather than a commission. So, yes.
One thought about the word commission.
Yes.
If we use planning commission, we may be confused even further with the city-county planning commission. There's a lot of that confusion already.
And there's a county commission. That's the other thing I thought about in terms of that.
We'll get a thesaurus
Yeah, right.
meeting.
We'll bring some ideas back to you.
Yeah, maybe there's another.
Agency,
think
I
it
don't
would-
know.
Yeah, agency might be as well. There must be some other, but I like transportation planning since that reflects what it does and says it, you know?
Transportation Planning Agency.
Maybe something like that.
Which has the benefit of being the acronym TPA.
Yes, right, there you. That's funny. And I don't know if there's anybody else out there that has any comments to make?
Yes, Commissioner. I agree with everything that's been said, because when people ask me, well, what boards are you on, or, you know, what are you involved in beyond city council, and I say MPO, I think many people nod and smile politely, but, you know, they ask themselves, what is Metropolitan Planning Organization? So, you know, just to clarify that, I think would be beneficial, just simple clarity so people know exactly. Because what is metropolitan planning? Are you laying out? Are you engineers laying out infrastructure? You know, what is it? It's transportation related, and everything that you said, and Commissioner Cohen as well. You know, it makes sense, and it's just a no-brainer. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. So I think we've heard from everyone, and so if we want to do presentation on the structure.
Very good. Sarah, I'll bring up your slides.
Right. Good morning, Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. This morning, I'm going to go over the apportionment process for the MPO's designation and reapportionment. Next slide. As far as little one-on-one on what the apportionment plan is, it does identify the geographic areas and the voting membership of the MPO. The federal law requires the MPO must be designated for each urbanized area over 50,000 in population. And then the state law requires the apportionment be reviewed after each census. And we're hoping that the data will be available in 2021. Next slide. As far as the designation and redesignation, it is based on the agreement between the governor and the local officials or local elected officials representing 75% of the population and the central city or cities. The designation of an existing MPO remains in effect until the MPO is redesignated. And then the state law limits the membership between 5 and 25 members. More than one MPO can be designated also to serve an urbanized area if it is appropriate for the complexity of that area. Next slide. So as far as the approval process, the apportionment plan will initially be approved by the MPO board. It'll then be taken to the BOCC and the central city, in this case, City of Tampa, for the redesignation. That redesignation is then sent to the governor for approval. Then the interlocal agreement is signed by all of the member organizations, including those designated as non-voting members. And we're expecting this entire process to take about 18 months. Next slide. As far as the current apportionment of the MPO board, we have 16 voting members. Between the jurisdiction, there are 10 seats, 5 for Hillsborough County, 3 for City of Tampa, and then 1 each for Plant City and Temple Terrace. As far as the representative agencies, they each have 1 voting member. This includes the Aviation Authority, Expressway Authority, Planning Commission, Port Authority, and School District. The Florida Department of Transportation is our 1 non-voting advisor on the board. Next slide. As far as the changes that were made in 2013 when the apportionment plan was last approved, FDOT was designated as an advisor and not a member. And this also means that even the non-voting members are still subject to the government in the sunshine. The Planning Commission was moved from a non-voting member to a voting member in the last apportionment, and the County Commissions was increased by 1 seat due to the growth in the unincorporated county. Next slide. As far as our next steps and timeline, we are waiting for the census data to be delivered to us. We will receive the population estimates as well as the maps of the urbanized areas. These are sort of the main requirements within the apportionment plan. So we're looking to see when that data will be delivered, hopefully sometime early in the spring. As far as what we're looking at now, we do have some 2020 population estimates from BEBR, the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. And here's sort of a little breakdown, as you can see, of each of the jurisdictions. We have unincorporated Hillsborough County at a little bit over 1 million in population. City of Tampa is at 392,000 and change. We have City of Plant City at just under 40,000. And the City of Temple Terrace just over 26,000. Next slide. All right, this table just shows the current voting structure that was approved in 2013. And as you can see at the bottom there, there's the Planning Commission that went from a non-voting member to a voting member. Again, we have the 5 seats for the Board of County Commissioners, 1 seat for the county commission, the three for City of Tampa, one specifically representing the office of the mayor. And then we have the City of Temple Terrace, again, representing the office of the mayor. And then our partner or representative agencies, again, the Expressway Authority, Heart, Aviation Authority, and Port Authority. Next slide. Right. So this is, I guess, where we open up for discussion. We will be bringing back options for the future or at future board meetings. So if there's any questions or comments that you'd like to bring forward, I'm pretty sure there are some. So please do so at this time.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. Actually, I do have a question. I thought one thing that we would see, I understand that from the increased population that we will have some issues in terms of proportional representation. Can you speak to that now? I'm just curious how that works.
Sure. So one of the things that we'll bring back when we bring back options for our voting membership is we'll compare the voting membership with the percent of population in each of the jurisdictions. And so we can do that a couple of different ways. We can show it overall in the board. We can show it as a percent of the board members that represent jurisdictions. But that's the idea, that we would come back to you with a table with some updated population estimates, what percent of our population is represented by which local government, and then what's the representation on our board.
And it's under federal law that 75% must be representing, is that elected representation, or what requirement is that?
That is in state law. I don't recall if it's in federal law as well. Cameron, do you know? But the requirement that you're referring to is that the apportionment plan be approved by local governments representing 75%, a minimum of 75% of the area's population. So that I know that is in state law. In our case, that requirement would be satisfied by a combination of the county commission and the city of Tampa. The state law also provides that the approval of the apportionment plan of the designation of the MPO must also be approved by the largest central city.
Thank you. I don't know if we want to jump in here, if anybody wants to start addressing some of this.
I'll ask a question if I may. May I be recognized?
Recognized, yes.
Thank you. I was surprised to see in the presentation that non-voting members are subject to the sunshine. Mr. Clark, can you clarify that? I'd like to explore as we look at this. We've got apparently plenty of time. I'd like to explore how we might configure things with regard to that. Like, can we have a technical committee of advisors that is separate to the board that might attend the meetings and speak at meetings and report and advise the board, but would then contribute their experience and knowledge, but would free us to be able to speak with FDOT and the Port Authority and in ways that we do, for example, with our Citizen Advisory Committee.
So it's a good question. Typically, the Sunshine Law is, simply it's for full board membership. We don't have a lot of boards that have voting members and non-voting members, but the rationale behind it is that if there is discussion that's happening on a topic that's publicly relevant, that people would be interested in, they would want to be able to see the deliberations, then whether you're a voting member or a non-voting member, the Sunshine Law would want those discussions to be in a publicly noticed setting so that people could view them and basically see the discussions that are leading up to the voting decisions. So in that context, I mean, it doesn't apply to FDOT now because FDOT's not a board member at all. The statute calls them a non-voting advisor. And advisors aren't subject to Sunshine rules because FDOT's not a board member anymore. But as it exists now, whether it was a voting member or a non-voting member of the same board, it's the fact that they're on the same board, I think, that would probably be determinative.
Thank you. That clears it up. I didn't realize they were that there was this advisor member distinction. Thank you.
Thank you. I also didn't realize that until this moment. So that's, I don't know if anyone else out there wants to ask questions or offer. I have a lot to say, but I'm restraining it.
Why don't
Should
you
I
go ahead
with it?
and we'll have at it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've thought about this a lot over the years, and we do have it seems kind of ridiculously constrained in terms of our sunshine requirements. We have the port, the airport, the expressway. Now I learned FDOT. I didn't know that was out there as a limit.
No, they're not under the sunshine because they're a non-voting advisor rather than
Okay,
member.
that's what I thought.
That was the point. That's the distinction.
Okay, great. Thank you. Right. But the port, airport, planning commissions, the expressway authority, those four in particular, to pull out right now are all four which, I have felt constrained about in terms of having a conversation. Because we are barred by sunshine, anything that would come before this board, and this board would be a natural place for some of the things that I would like to have conversations about in terms of those places. So I think it really diminishes the ability to converse and figure out, different things. I already feel actually in some ways very constrained by sunshine between the way that we can make progress moving issues forward and talking with other members just on our regular county commission or city council or the other boards we're in, because sometimes more process, not trying to not be transparent, but more process, it would be helpful, and we don't get that. So to really, I think to have the port, the airport, and as I said, the expressway authority, and I'm just looking for the port, the airport, the
Aviation. Oh, right.
yeah, no, those in particular, the expressway authority, those.
Oh, the planning commission was the
Yeah,
other one.
and
I think.
the plan, here's the thing. First of all, we have staff representation on those three things. One of the ideas was to have board representation, but each of those have, I don't know about the expressway authority, but each of them, the port and the airport have 6 board members, 2 of which are the mayor, 1 county commissioner on each of them, and so there's, and then you have the staff, and they're not elected except for the ones that we already send. I know that's, but they have these members, and we sometimes already have, like Commissioner Miller was on the airport authority, but also chair of this board. So it just didn't even make any sense to have not a board member that was not elected, but then we send staff people for the port, the airport, and the expressway authority, which would be far better off on a technical advisory committee. I guess I could be clearer about this. There's two things we're looking for on the MPO. Representation of people, and that's what our electeds provide, and it's even required to be. The other thing that we need is expertise, and the expertise in the port, the airport, the expressway authority, even HART and the school board can better be provided by staff people in those organizations, but the staff people shouldn't be the voting members of this board. They should be on a technical advisory board. It seems to make much more sense to me in terms of how we progress and move in the organization. Whereas the county commissioners and the electeds are people that represent but don't have the expertise.
That's certainly true. I mean, I was trying to be self-deprecating. I wasn't referring to anyone else.
Right. No, I know. No, I agree with you. I mean, that's why I said it too. We need the expertise, but we don't. But we, and we don't get that. But we could, in a technical advisory capacity, counsel of those people, and then it's just so confused. We have a representative from HART, but we already have 4 people on this MPO that are also on the HART board. And so, and then we have another HART board member that can't offer us either the expertise or the representation, and that's no thing to say. I'm not saying that as criticism of the HART board member. That would be impossible for any HART board member probably to do. So in the case of HART, it should really be a staff member on a technical advisory committee that's a non-voting, and we have plenty of representation of electeds on both. So it doesn't make sense at all the way that we have staffed or have our MPO set up. Sure, you're recognized.
So I've given a lot of thought to this issue over the years, and there's a ton of validity to a lot of those arguments. There's some I agree with, and there's some I have a little bit less agreement with, and I just want to go through a couple. The first thing is that I feel like, and I'll use myself as the example, even though it's very new, being the port, that when I'm here as a county commissioner, I'm wearing the commissioner hat, not my hat as a member of the Port Authority Board. I feel like that board exerts itself, or should exert itself, through its own member. That my view is as an elected commissioner. When I was on the city council, there actually were some times when I voted differently on something in the CRA, in the Community Redevelopment Agency, than I did as a council member because I felt like I was wearing a different hat. And while Commissioner Kemp is absolutely correct about HART having basically 5 members sitting here at the table, on the other hand, our commission representatives on the Expressway Authority and the Aviation Authority aren't here. So it's like every year it's going to change as to who's here and who's not. I think, though, that those of us that serve on other boards, I think it's important that we think about what hat we're wearing when we're sitting here. One of the things that concerns me about the idea of, say, replacing, well, first of all, I think, let's use the Port and Aviation Authority as examples. I mean, I think they have a vested interest in what goes on here. The port has a lot of freight that it needs to move. The Aviation Authority has to interlink with our transportation networks. Whether or not they're actual voting members or whether or not they have a staff person or a board member, I think those are all individually important discussions. Maybe it should only be the executive director without the ability to have an alternate. Maybe it should be a board member. I don't even know. Maybe they shouldn't be a voting member. Maybe they should. But if taking them off of being a voting member, or if they become an advisor like FDOT and are exempt from the sunshine, that creates a whole nother set of issues on the outside, because then all the board members can be lobbied by them. So you have a real weight, I think, in either direction of whether it's better to have the discussion here at the table or better to remove them from it and have them basically like everybody else. I think the other thing is that we're going to have a lot of time to work through these. And in public comment, there was a suggestion about a citizen member of the MPO, which I think also deserves to be looked at. So I think we ought to look at all this. But I do think we have to keep in mind that at least with this apportionment, we are going to have to get the agreement of the governor to whatever we do. And if it's a very time-consuming process, we just need to be realistic about what we're actually going to be able to accomplish. I think my understanding of the way this works is it would happen before the gubernatorial election, because the reapportionments in 21, anything we would do would have to happen at that time, right?
Yes.
Ms. Alden? So, just recognizing that that's out there as a constraint, So those are just a couple of comments, I guess.
Thank you. And do we have Commissioner Smith and Councilman Maniscalco?
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you. I think my thought on this, and we do have time for discussion, and I appreciate all the comments, and this will be fleshed out more with the full MPO board. But just off the top of my head, in this group, well, not off the top of my head, but my perspective on it is that historically, the reason MPOs were created was to represent the citizens and provide a voice for citizens in decisions about grant funding from our state and federal agencies on highway projects and transportation projects that might impact their neighborhoods and communities on the ground in ways that might not otherwise be considered when those decisions were being made at the higher levels of government. When the federal government was going to put a highway through your neighborhood, that was having impacts, and the MPOs were set up specifically to provide that input and voice of the citizens at the table to the upper levels of government as they were making these kinds of transportation decisions. So to me, the mission of MPO, the purpose, is to represent the citizens of Hillsborough County in transportation decisions, rather than to be a roundtable stakeholder group of everybody with different interests in moving transportation and who might have vested interests and monetary interests and profit interests in how these decisions are made. They have other avenues of providing their own input. I have participated in many stakeholder groups in my life that were roundtables of very different perspectives, and I have a lot of respect for that system and that process and those groups, and learned that we could really come together, find common ground among disparate interests when we did that. But I think that this body was supposed to provide that voice of the people. And so I personally feel that is better accomplished with elected officials who are answerable directly to their constituents every election, and also that have that constant connection with our constituents, that we're out there talking to our constituents in ways that the director of Port Authority or Aviation Authority is, just that's not part of their job, to be out in the neighborhoods talking about how transportation impacts the citizens of this county. So I think that the MPO is not supposed to be a mix of that. We're supposed to have that singular purpose, and the other agencies have, as I say, their own avenues. I think it's certainly important that as the elected officials make decisions and provide that input and come to decisions about how they're going, what position they're going to take on behalf of the citizens, it's very important that we have the input on some level as advisors from all these other agencies who are experts on aspects of transportation in our county that that can contribute very meaningfully to our deliberations. But I would like to see this body become more representative, just elected representatives, and the non-elected members and technical experts have an advisory role that is not an actual voting member on the decision, because sometimes, especially with as many as we have, the voice of the people through their electeds can get really diluted by these other agencies that with representation that is not elected, not accountable and answerable to the people the way we elected officials are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Maniscalco, did you have any thoughts or comments?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
And I just, again, because I feel it's kind of, it's very difficult to talk about this with clarity. The port, the airport, and expressway have staff people, not board people. They're not elected people. And we need their expertise, but I don't think they should be voting members. And it would be really good to have the technical expertise. HART and the Planning Commission, we don't have staff people. We could use staff people. But again, we have two more non-electeds on those representing. So we have 5 non-electeds, 3 that are staff people, 2 that are board people. But I think from all 5 of those organizations, what we could use is expertise, and we don't need elected representation from those. So I would look at that as being part of an advisory council. I think the one outlier there is the school. That's the only other representation that's actually a board representative.
It's elected, though. It's an elected.
That's what I'm
right.
saying. It's the only one that's elected. And it would be from a representation stand, and even that you could, argue about needing some kind of school staff involvement on a technical committee. But, I don't have, that's, I think, more debatable because it is elected in terms of representing. And then finally, as to the citizen member, I've thought for a while that we could have the CIC could, elect one of their members every year, or, I don't know how that would work, but maybe something like that to, represent on the MPO. I'm just, it's just some thoughts, but.
Madam Chair, this is Cameron. I have something I can add to that. Do you, may I speak?
Of course, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So regarding the representation on the board for the authorities, so say HART and aviation, expressway, those sorts of things, it's I think plausible that if the board wanted to, potentially even through a bylaws change, that the board could direct that the voting member from those authorities be a board member from those authorities rather than a staff person, because there's obviously a requirement within the law that when it is from an elected body such as the county or city council, that the members have to be from the board. This came up sort of briefly when we were adding the school board a few years ago, and I spoke with the school board attorney about whether the member from the school board needed to be a school board member or a member from staff. And although the statutes were not specific, he and I agreed that it should be, because the school board is an elected body, that it should be an elected school board member, and so that's why we have that. But that, of course, that doesn't guarantee that, if, for instance, with HART, that if you required to be a HART board member doesn't mean that it would be an elected person, because you obviously have commissioners and city councils on those boards. There are appointed members from those boards as well that could be appointed, but you could ask that it be a board member from those entities. And then the second thing would be the question of a citizen voting member on the MPO. That's come up before. I would say that we're constrained by statute from doing that, because both federal and state law lay out who is allowed to be a voting member of the boards. I know Chris Vila. I live in Tampa Heights. I interact with him with some frequency. But that I believe, because he mentioned about having a citizen board member before, I believe that the Miami-Dade MPO actually has citizen appointee, but the difference there is that the Miami-Dade MPO, their membership is expressly laid out in Florida statutes, and I think that's the only MPO that has that. So I think in the near term, without a change of law, I think we would be constrained from having the citizen members of the MPO, but the board could designate for the authorities that they have board members be their appointees rather than staff persons, if that was, I think, the board's wish.
Thank you. And I'll go to you in a second, but just to be clear, and you may not know this, but each of these, and I said I didn't know about the Expressway Authority, but each of them have only 6 board members, 4 appointees by the governor, then the mayor, and then 1 county commissioner. And for instance, that one elected person, well, besides the mayor, would be Commissioner Cohen on the port.
On the port.
Yeah, on the port. On the airport, the one elected member besides the mayor would be Commissioner Myers, who's
White. Commissioner White is the aviation authority.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner White. That's right. And the Expressway Authority would be, I think, Commissioner Myers.
Hagan.
Okay, got it. I got it. So at any rate, thank you. I didn't quite realize
So
that.
that's the problem, is some would be, anyway,
Yeah,
I'm not recognizing that.
that's why it doesn't really, I don't think that quite gets to it because of the limited number of electeds that are on any of those boards. Those boards are almost entirely appointed boards. And again, we have, 5 boards that do not have, or representation from 5 boards that aren't elected people, but yet we don't get the, again, the expertise that we need, I don't think, from HART, or I would say the Planning Commission as well should be a staff person in an advisory capacity. But anyway, I'll let Ms. Alden, I know you've been trying to speak to help us clarify this and understand a little better.
Sure, thank you. So Cameron alluded to 2 points of information that I'd like to bring back when we bring you back some different ideas to consider. So one is he mentioned the membership of the Miami-Dade MPO. And so my thought was we'll take a look at the structure of other MPO boards around Florida, particularly the larger MPOs, and bring that back to you, who their voting members and non-voting advisors are. And then another important piece of the puzzle, as Cameron mentioned, is Florida statute. The statute does have a lot of provisions for different types of representatives that you might, we have the option of including on the MPO board. I think that the section about apportionment specifically is pretty telling. One of the things it says here, it talks about the representatives of general purpose local governments and an agreement between them as part of the interlocal agreement. Then it goes on to say that representatives of the Department of Transportation shall serve as non-voting advisors to the MPO governing board. So very clear about that. Representatives of the Department of Transportation shall serve as non-voting advisors to the board, to the governing board. Additional non-voting advisors may be appointed by the MPO as deemed necessary. To the maximum extent feasible, each MPO shall seek to appoint non-voting representatives of various multimodal forms of transportation that are not otherwise represented by the voting members of the MPO. And what they mean by that, for example, is a number of counties operate bus services. And so the coordination with the bus service would happen through the county's representation. So, there are a lot of other provisions in the statute, talking about, for example, representatives of military installations. I don't recall them saying anything specific about citizen representatives, but it's possible that we could have a citizen representative, maybe the chair of the CAC, sit as a non-voting advisor with the governing board, if that were your wish. So what I'd like to do is bring back at a subsequent meeting some different options since we've had a chance to talk through this, and some more research on how the boards are structured around the state and what are some of the provisions in the statute.
Also, the statute you're reading is a federal statute, right?
I'm reading the state.
State statute, okay. Oh, okay. I'd like to see, and maybe other board members on the MPO would be interested in just, if you could just reference, what is that?
The state law, there is actually a link to it in your agenda packet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I haven't gotten a chance to focus
We
too much
put a
on
lot
the
of stuff into
policy
that
one.
agenda
Yes.
packet.
Yes, okay, sorry.
But there is a link to the statute. It's the reference, the statutory number is 339.175.
Okay, I'll check it out more thoroughly. I haven't gotten a chance to explore this as much as I had hoped.
But we'll come back and lay out some of those provisions for who to consider.
And I would be very interested in finding out about some other boards in Florida and what they're doing.
Very good.
Looks like we have a, anyway. Okay, well, actually, at this point, what time is it?
Why don't we, yeah.
I think we might be, it looks like we are at the end of our agenda, unless anybody else wants to comment. And hearing none, I guess we'll go, I don't imagine we have any old or new business. Anyone? Okay, so we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I'll be back shortly.